Okay. It looks like we are live. Yes. Hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Jason Levine, and for today's brief live stream, we're going to be talking about a common audio question that I get asked all the time. Probably in a month, I get asked this at least half a dozen times or more, and that is quite simply when to normalize your audio in a timeline, or when to compress it, or when to do both, or why use one or the other. And there are a couple of really specific reasons why you would do one or maybe not do one of those processes. But first, you really need to understand why you're doing it and what they involve in the first place. So as always, we've got our live interactive chats. Now, I'm going to go through this fairly quickly, kind of show you the workflow, and then I'll take questions at the end unless I happen to see something pop up here. But this should be short so that you can watch it on the replay and figure it out. But I'll be taking your questions as well. So as always, a couple of quick shouts. Thank you so much for joining. Keith Owen, great to see you. Krish Paul, hello. Mickey RB, Hugo Vega, Frank S. What up, yo? Jake Carpenter. Oh, thank you very much, sir. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you for watching. Francis Shepard, how's it going? Noggle Projects. Oh, excellent. Curvy X, nice to see you. William Kindrex, Jim Tech 86, Spotter Active. All right, so let's go ahead and get to it. And hey, Richard Hawks, how you doing? All right, and we're going to bounce right in. Amy Schiavo, nice to see you. Craig Larson, Al Hassan Selmi, hello. All right, let me go ahead and move my screen over again. I will take questions towards the end, but let's get right into it. Okay, so I've got some content here. You've seen some of this before from the film A Scene Between, directed by Brian Rawlis. And this is, as you can see on screen, this is some of the pre-graded sort of raw media before it was mixed, before anything was done to it. Captured via MXF in multi-channel audio. And it's just dialogue, just this guy speaking. I don't know if he was laved or there was a boom mic here. Track 1 or channel 1 was the on-camera audio. That's this top track that you're seeing here. And the reason why the wave looks like that, undoubtedly, is because there's a ton of background noise and garbage because the camera was kind of far away. So that's just sort of a reference there. And then the second track here is either, again, the boom or the lav or whatever they had on our actor over here. All right. So let's go ahead and just take a quick listen to this. Nothing you're going to really reveal here. But what I want you to do is sort of pay attention. It's going to be fairly low amplitude, as is often the case with raw audio media. And pay attention to kind of the peak amplitude here on the level meters. So here we go. Take a quick listen.
Is that you're never going to beat a wave. You're never going to wrestle it to the ground. All you can do is be a part of that energy. And just take a little bit of that energy to move you forward in your own life. Okay. So as you can see, we're kind of moving, modulating between around minus 42 to minus 18 or so, or give or take, maybe minus 20. Peaking around minus 20. It's fairly low amplitude. If I look at the waveform again, just inspected visually, it seems somewhat even, meaning that his dialogue, how it was captured, he's not all over the place in terms of his amplitude. Really common, right, for people to get excited and sort of change the tonality of their voice, and you end up with all these differing levels, which is why people typically want to first just go ahead and normalize. Well, what is normalization, and why does it matter, and why should you know about it? All right, well, to really explain that, we really need to go over to Audition so that you can see it. I like giving you visual aids and ways to really visually understand how these things all work together. So from Premiere, of course, we can right-click, control-click on the audio file here and choose to edit the clip in Adobe Audition, which I've already done. It'll send a copy over there. It'll make a copy of it and bring it into your waveform editor here. And now we've got a nice big view where we can really see what this file looks like, see the levels, see if there's any noise, lots of different things we can reveal here. All right, first step is running what I call, or what is called, amplitude statistics. This is going to tell you everything you need to know about this audio file before you do anything. So let's go ahead and scan it. And when I do that, right away, this gives you all of the attributes of the audio file. So as I guessed, just by looking at the level meters in Premiere, the peak is right around minus 20, in this case, minus 19.69. We don't have any clipped samples, obviously, fairly low amplitude here.
These RMS values, just so you know, think of these as like your averages, your average loudness. And we could see that too, right? The sort of the valleys, the average of his speaking was around -30 here. So this is pretty legit. And then these others, for the moment, these don't actually matter. Curiously, this was captured at 16-bit, so I don't know what capture device they were using. If you're using any kind of external secondary audio recorder, whether it's a Zoom or a Tascam or anything, whatever it is, iPhone, no, you should be recording in 24-bit. All those devices do that now, so maybe this was already transcoded down. I'm not entirely sure, but just keep that in mind. In terms of processing, you really want to make sure that you're capturing your audio in as high a bit depth as possible, and all of the modern devices capture in 24-bit. Okay, so you might say to yourself, okay, is this a good candidate for normalization? So what is Normalize? Well, what Normalize does is it analyzes your audio file, and it looks for the loudest peak, okay? The peak amplitude. And by the way, if you click this little icon here, this will take you to the actual sample of that -19.69, which is right here, okay? So it looks at that loudest peak. And Normalize then says, okay, based on that peak, this is exactly how much headroom you have so that we can globally amplify everything at the same level, at the same rate. So what this means is technically we could amplify this or normalize this 19.68 decibels and we still won't clip. It'll be just below 0. Remember with audio, digitally, we're working in a negative logarithmic scale. 0 is as loud as we can get. So we effectively have almost 20 decibels of headroom. That's pretty cool. Maybe you've been mixing in Premiere and you're like, God, everything's so quiet. I got to do all this stuff. Yes, because potentially, and this is, by the way, this is good. I mean, if you're recording to a Tascam, Zoom, whatever, external recorder, you want to give yourself headroom. Fortunately, today, digitally, we don't need to try and peak everything at 0. Really, ideally, if you're doing dialogue or on-set audio, anywhere between -16 and -8 is kind of good. Averaging maybe -10 for your sweet spot. This is a little low for my taste, but it's still legit. It's still okay. It's still going to sound good if you know what you're doing when you're mixing, all right? So because of this, and just by sort of visually looking at this waveform, the peaks aren't too out of band. Now, keep in mind, though, remember the average here is around -30, all right? And the peak is -20. So there's about a 10 decibel difference in there. Is this still a good candidate for Normalize? Well, yes, but we could do additional things to it. So let's normalize it first. So if we go up to Effects here, Amplitude, Compression, Normalize, okay? And by the way, if we were back in Premiere, you can also do this under Audio Gain right here, where you have a couple of different options. And the one that you want is Normalize Max Peak too, okay? That's what you would typically choose. Now, before you go using that in Premiere, though, I'm a bigger fan of doing it on the Audition side, but stick with me. So let's go ahead and normalize this, all right? Now, for dialogue, again, do you want to normalize to 0 so that the peak hits 0? No, you never want to normalize to 0, full stop. I'm sure there's someone out there who's like, do that. Don't do that. There's no point. There's literally no point in doing that. Your ear will not perceive a change in amplitude that is anything less than a dB. So in theory, if you normalize to -1.5, -1.4, or -0.4, you're not going to hear the difference anyway. Give yourself that extra headroom, because what happens is once you start processing, adding effects, adding compression, adding limiting, adding other things, and then you eventually go out to a compressed file format, perhaps for YouTube, like MP4, something like that. Well, very, very likely, if your audio is too hot, you're going to have clipped samples. And that could have some potentially disastrous effects during playback, okay? So never normalize to 0. Half a dB below 0, I mean, I don't recommend that either, but you can on production files, not your master. So because this file is going to be tweaked in a mixing environment where we'll have level control, we could theoretically do that. I don't typically like to do that for dialogue. I will generally normalize things to -3, all right? So the peak amplitude will be -3. Apply, it does its thing. Let's rescan the selection, and now you can see that the peak, that same peak, by the way, if we click this again, it's the same spot, you see. It hasn't changed the dynamics. It hasn't squished loud bits down and made soft bits louder. There's no dynamic anything going on here. It globally amplified everything by approximately 16 decibels. That's what Normalize does. It scans for the loudest peak, and then based on that peak, tells you how much headroom you have, and then you can globally make everything universally that much louder, okay? So now when we play this back,
is that you're never going to beat a wave. You're never going to wrestle it to the ground. All you can do...
Okay. And again, if we were to go to like a 24 decibel range here, granted this is only this one peak gets that hot, but it will never exceed -3.
Is that you're never going to beat a wave. You're never going to wrestle it to the ground.
Okay.
All you can do...
You can see most of those peaks are really much softer. Okay, so now that we're looking at this, right, you can see this peak here, this is around -6, this is -3, some of these here, again, -12. So, again, we really only have between a couple of the loudest peaks about a 3 to 5 dB difference. Good candidate for normalization, all right? Anything more than that, and where would you encounter that? Well, you can encounter it in speech. Sometimes people say, hey, I'm... and they get very quiet. That initial hey can screw everything up, right? Because if that first little attack transient, let's say that it hit -1. Well, when you analyze to normalize, your peak is -1. So what does that mean to you? It means that you can only make everything 1 decibel louder using normalize before you hit 0. Now, there's ways to fix that. I'm going to show you in just a second. But that's the key, is that one, we get this a lot, right, with production sound. Maybe the boom gets knocked or something and you have this momentary, there might not even be anybody talking, but it's in the file. So if you go to normalize with that in there, it's messing you up. You got to get rid of that, or you need to attenuate it or fix it before you scan, before you normalize. Make sense? Okay. So now that we've done that, this is pretty good. And again, I could go ahead and save this and send it back to Premiere. Now, while that's fine, all right, now you can, of course, run effects in real time in Premiere. I'm going to show you this destructively so you can see really what it's doing. Why would you compress, okay? So we've normalized this. Well, compression, audio compression, not file compression in this case, is going to allow you to tame or control those peaks, right? So even though there's only about a 6 decibel difference between the quietest and so the louder peaks, maybe we want everything to just be really even. Think, radio voiceover. Think, some podcasts, not all podcasts. We want it to be very even, right? Whenever you have dialogue in a movie trailer, someone speaking, it's very, very even. Even if they're whispering, the whisper is evenly loud. That's really what you want a lot of the time. So this is where you use compression to bring down those peaks and kind of make everything the same apparent peak level, apparent loudness in one step. All right. So we can do that using any number of our compressors. Now we have lots of them in here in both Premiere and Audition. To show you a little combo here, because we can do maybe 2 things at once, let's go into the Revamped Dynamics effect. Now, I don't love the compressor in this one. It's pretty good, but I do love it because it has combination compression and auto gate. And the gate can be used to silence any background noise or maybe slightly more room tone than you need. Again, good production sound people will have room tones separately recorded, so you can always fly it back in underneath. But maybe on this dialogue track, we just want it clean and uninterrupted, so we could use the gate. We'll get to that in a second, all right? So let's go ahead and add our compressor here. Now, again, we're not going to get into how to use the compressor in this one. You can check out my Audio 101 series, Episode 8, How to Set a Compressor. I'm just going to go through this real quickly right now. Learning compression is very difficult, all right? So if you want to learn that, check out Audio 101, Episode 8 on YouTube. If you'd like to see it, maybe I'll stream about it separately this week and just do compression, because it's the most important audio thing, frankly, that you can really learn. It's going to help you the most. Taming peaks, all right? So just based on these stats, now these are the default settings here. Let's turn on the compressor. First, we need to set our ratio. How much do we want to compress this by? So for every... and the ratio works in conjunction with the threshold. So, and you've probably seen it before. It's like 2 to 1, 3 to 1, 6 to 1, 8 to 1. For something like this, fairly simple, straight ahead dialogue, I'm going to use a 3-to-1 ratio. Now what that means is for every 3 decibels above the threshold, it's 1 dB at the output, okay? So it's going to squish it down X number of dB to be 1 at the output. If it goes, say, 6 decibels above the threshold with a 3-to-1 ratio, it's 2 decibels at the output. If it goes 9 decibels above the threshold, 3 decibels at the output, and so on and so forth, okay? 3-to-1 is pretty common for just standard dialogue. Again, he doesn't have a huge amount of variation here in his speech, but this is going to even things out nicely. Now you need to set the threshold. This is what we call our gain reduction meter right here. You need to set that threshold so we're at a minimum going at least 3 decibels above. We should see, you know, it's sort of hard to read the meter here, which is why I say I don't love this one. Assuming this is -6, right about here. This is -3 right here. So we need to see at least 2 of these bars lit up to even be compressing this properly. We'll get to that in a second. Then you've got your attack time. Now, a 0.1 attack is super fast. It's going to catch everything. It might also be a little too quick. This can often lead to a little bit of breathing and pumping artifacts. Attack and release also work in tandem together. For most, you know, medium, slow-paced dialogue, if you want to catch everything, 3 to 10 milliseconds is probably a good starting point, all right? There's no absolutes here. You have to, and everybody speaks differently, and the mic that it was captured on, you need to listen. But 3 to 10 milliseconds is usually a good place to start. For a release, 50 milliseconds is a little fast. I'll probably use that for something like a final, and especially if it were like mastered music. For dialogue, I'm going to go with 100 milliseconds, and we're not going to do any makeup gain. I don't want to make this louder, because I can use normalization for that. I just want to even out the dynamics. So let's go ahead and play this back. I'll adjust the threshold. See, I think around -20 is probably going to be right where we need to be. And then we'll actually apply it. All right, let's take a listen here.
Is that you're never going to beat a wave. You're never going to wrestle it to the ground.
So we're very much in range here.
All you can do is be a part of that energy. And just take a little bit of that energy to...
All right, in fact, here, I'll split the difference. We'll do like -19.5, okay? So I've now got this compressed. Let me go ahead and apply that. And when I do it, oh, look, and it just missed this one little peak right here, but that's fine. When I do that now, you'll see that all the peaks of that audio look even. In fact, here, let me go ahead, let's do it at -20. Let's see if we can just nail that last little peak right there too. I'll do -20.5, all right? Yeah, so this one, it's okay. Really, we're you know, the difference here is, again, about 3 dB. But you can see that all of our peaks here are very even. Here's our before, all over the place. Here's our after. And if you listen to it, it's not going to sound any different. It's just squeezing down all of those initial loud transients, which people tend to do. You tend to start out a little bit louder and trail off a little bit. I teach a speaking course now at Adobe, and that's one of the things that I talk about not doing, is how to keep your voice consistent when delivering a message, right? So that's something that comes with, you know, a lot of practice, but you can do it with compression really easily.
Is that you're never going to beat a wave. You're never going to wrestle it to the ground.
Okay, now, because we did this, because we squished this down, and that may even be a little too much compression, just trying to show you how it's evened out the dynamics here. If I rescan this now this is showing us that we have 10 decibels of amplitude. So again, I could, in theory, I can normalize. By the way, this adjust amplitude is doing the exact same thing. If I'm just looking at this visually, I can go to around -3 now. And now everything is that much louder.
Is that you're never going to beat a wave. You're never going to wrestle it to the ground. All you can do is be a part of that energy.
Okay. It's clean. It's nice. Now, again, we're hearing a little bit more of the room tone in there. So this is where, if we just undo both of these real quickly, if we were to go back into dynamics, we could add something like the auto gate just to silence the room tone in between sections, okay? Maybe not even silence it entirely, but just be mindful of it. Again, this is really entirely up to you. It kind of depends on what's going to be underneath this. If it's just dialogue, maybe you don't silence it at all, because then it might sound a little too weird. Again, if you've got separately recorded room tone, not an issue anyway. It just depends what you're going for. I'm just pointing out that this is where the gate is. So if we wanted to clean it up in between his little pauses there, let's just take a listen here and see what we've got. I want a pretty fast attack. The release is okay, and we want it to hold. All right, let's just take a quick listen. I'm going to set this real quickly.
Is that you're never going to beat a wave. You're never going to wrestle it to the ground. All you can do is be a part of that energy and just take a little bit of that energy to move you forward in your own life. Is that you're never going to beat a wave. You're never going to wrestle it to the ground. All you can do is...
Okay, and I backed off on the threshold because it's sounding a little more compressed to me. Let's go ahead and apply this, all right? And now what you see visually here is that it's just completely silent in between spoken passages. So again, we scan, all right? Let's raise it back to -3 approximately. And now when we play it...
Is that you're never going to beat a wave. You're never going to wrestle it to the ground. All you can do is be a part of that energy and just take a little bit of that energy to move you forward in your own life.
All right? Super clean, super tight, very much, you know, not in your face, but very even. Nice. Great. Super. All right? So that's using a combination of compression, gating, and normalization to re-amplify everything. All right? And again, if you were doing this on the Audition side, if I were to save this and go back to Premiere, you saw just below here, the waveform has now updated, right? So now when we wind this back and we hit play...
Is that you're never going to beat a wave. You're never going to wrestle it to the ground. All you can do is...
Smooth, right? Awesome. So, combination of things. Now, here's where normalization can bite you, all right? Not literally, but here's where it can be problematic, okay? So I have, I've got a little audio file that I just recorded as just sort of an example of this. First and foremost, if we take a look here, we can already see what's wrong, right? So you've got this kind of even-toned audio and this one little click, right? So let's just play this back real quickly. So in the case of this file, what I really wanted to showcase was that normalization. Okay, now you might be going, I can't really hear it, but I heard some kind of pop in there. Yes, okay? So this is kind of illustrating a common problem, a common scenario. All right, so let's go ahead and send this over to Audition. All right. So here is where Normalize is not going to help you unless you do a little homework first. So what do we do here, right? Well, first, as mentioned, scan. I need to know how much headroom do I have, right? Something that I've seen people do, like in Premiere, in that audio gain workflows, they just say, all right, amplify everything by 10 dB. So now you have things that are way too loud. Maybe they're going above 0, theoretically, causing other problems because you didn't really analyze the audio first. You didn't really know what you had to work with. So if we scan this, what you'll see is that stupid, I was actually just doing a snap here, it's at -1, which means that if we normalize to 100%, what's the maximum we can normalize here? 0.97 decibels. It's not, and I just told you, right? Your ear doesn't perceive a change in amplitude if it's 1.5 dB or lower. So you're not going to hear any difference normalizing this, obviously, because it's only going to move a decibel. So normalization isn't going to help you here at all. Now, if you wanted to normalize this clip, what would you do? Well, you have to fix this. Now, in the case of like, you know, boom mics or you know, you knock something or whatever, or maybe could be a clapboard, or it could be just some momentary click or pop. Lots of different ways you can do it. You could, of course, just come in here and again, using our on-clip volume tool, I could destructively just drop that way down so that it's like in the same range as everything else. Really wanted to. All right, it's still there. It's just now it's the same approximate level as everything else. So if I rescan, now what you can see is, oh, look at that. We have 26 decibels of amplitude that we can apply to this, okay? So, like I said, now this was recorded just in here with sort of noisy streaming computer running. But if I were to normalize now, -3, apply, all right, again, being mindful of my own room tone in here. But now... So in the case of this file, what I really wanted to showcase was that normalization. Okay. Right? Makes sense. So if you have those clicks, something that's loud, it could even be, again, someone's attack transient, just the way that they spoke that's throwing something off. You can come into Audition, and you really need to be careful about what you're selecting as well, by the way. So I was doing that, knowing that it's just a click. If it's something like a t or a p, right, and it's not a low-end rumble, it's just that the mid to high range caused this little transient peak. Again, you can use the on-clip volume to minimize those to bring them within range, okay? Now, there's lots of different types of transients that you can encounter, plosives being one of them. So the plosive, doing this may not help you because that's actually some low-frequency rumble that's causing that. I mean, this will help you, but there's a better way to do it. Something like a plosive, you could use something like our Fft filter, also in Premiere Pro, to actually kill the mic rumble, okay? This is kind of the, this is a really cool tip for removing plosives, because not only is it going to get rid of that abundance of low frequency boominess that you got, but in doing so, you'll see it will visually remove that out of band peak. That's just the nature of a plosive. You still may need to do a manual tweak if you're trying to normalize, but it's something that you can do very, very easily with the Fft filter, okay? So again, if you've got a situation like this, which is really common, especially if you've got people on booms, right, miking from afar, you can have, even if they go, oh, something like that, it can throw everything off. So you want to analyze, fix or tweak what needs to be done, and then normalize. And then if need be, if you want to adjust dynamics, again, even looking at the way I was like whispering this, I mean, my dynamics are very even. One little peak that's kind of out here. So I don't need to really compress this unless I'm going for a compressed sound. But even visually, I can tell you there's not a lot of dynamic change here. It's evenly spoken. So, I've seen a lot of newcomers to compression get a bit heavy-handed because they want things to be completely evened out, but you don't always need to do that. And dialogue is one of those. Again, if we're talking a movie trailer, yeah, you want it in your face, present, loud, no dips in amplitude. If you're talking the film, an emotional scene, for my money, I like some dynamics, right? I like it when you need to lean in a little. I like it, that's how people talk, right? People don't talk all at one level like this. I mean, some people do, but, myself included. Just be aware, okay? So that is normalization, understanding peak amplitude, applying compression, and as well applying a little bit of limiting. And again, if this were coming from Premiere, as it was, again, we could save the change, bounce back to Premiere, and it's repaired, okay? So let's come over and hit some questions. All right, I'm going to start over here on Periscope. I saw quite a few coming in. All right, William Kindrix, okay. Noise reduction first. Yes, and that's another point too. I mean, again, now you can run it in real time. You don't have to destructively apply, but if you've got something that's really noisy, and by the way, noise reduction before normalization, I wouldn't recommend that because if the file's already super quiet, you're trying to denoise a signal that's really, really quiet. And if it's below, say, minus 20 dB, you could incur additional artifacts when reamplifying. So normalization will actually reveal all the noise. That's a good thing. Remember, it's not applying any dynamic compression. So it's not like making the noise move dynamically. No. It's just reamplifying. So normalize first before denoising. And that's kind of an absolute. I really can't think of a reason why you'd denoise before normalization. Unless it's like a hum, something that's very consistent, which you can just knock out. But even still, it doesn't hurt to normalize. It's not affecting the dynamic range, or I should say the dynamics of the spoken word or whatever it is. Is it analyzing the whole clip or just the visible part of the clip from Premiere? Whatever you send from Premiere. So yes, it's respecting the cut points and I don't know if it's sending over handles or not. When you do a edit in sequence, you can adjust the handle duration. When you do an edit in, it's taking the very specific section that is coming from Premiere Pro, analyzing that and applying the setting there, okay? What's up, Aunt Pruitt? Never late, my friend. Always on time, okay? All right, bouncing over to Facebook. Silas Moses. Hello from Nigeria. Olivier Bertrand, hello. Benapadier, hello, all right. Vincent from Montreal, Mohammed. Okay. Thank you, Amy, you're very welcome. Craig Larson, sweet. Gilmar, Tram from Toronto, okay. Andrew Treves, please stream it later this week. Okay, so I will do a stream, maybe even Wednesday, all right, on how to use a compressor, all right? It'll be worth watching. Steve Kahn, filling in my blanks, awesome. Okay, Frank, Frank's always got good questions. Are there any real differences between Normalize Dynamics and Normalize Hard Limiter? Great question. So, yes, and here's why. Because hard limiter is just that. It is a compression ratio above 10:1. And actually, in fact, it's just a digital ceiling. So it's just going to slam everything to whatever you set that ceiling at. If you don't add a lot of input boost, or no input boost, theoretically, sonically, it shouldn't actually be too different from, evening out dynamic peaks and then normalizing. However, something like a hard limiter or a brick wall limiter, the algorithm itself is going to sound a little bit different because of the nature of what a hard limiter is doing, right? It's a hard stop. So sonically on dialogue, I probably wouldn't hard limit and then normalize just because it may affect the sound in an adverse kind of way. Similarly, that's why I don't typically use that limiter compressor the dynamics effect compressor, because sonically it just has kind of an aggressive sound to me. I like some of our other native ones. So the short answer is, Frank, if done very carefully, a straight hard limit can effectively be the same as doing all those passes, right? You would hard limit just to cut the peaks off and then normalize to bring everything up with no input boost. So excellent question. Chuck Boland in Paris. Nice to see you. Thank you very much. All right. Kazi Sabir. How to make sounds deep down. I don't know what that means exactly. Let me know what you want. I also want to know how I can real-time ride gain on my background music. Chuck, so you can watch. I just actually showed this. If you go back here on the Premiere Pro Facebook page, look at some of my recent streams. I just did a whole thing on automation and things in the mixer, in the audio mixer, and I show you how to ride the faders and automate changes in amplitude. This was just 2 weeks ago, so you can find it there. You can also find it on YouTube in my Audio 101 series for mixing, but I just did a live stream on fader automation not but 2 weeks ago. Okay, Hugo Vega, how would doing a noise print of room tone and then doing noise reduction be a decent alternative to using auto gate? Or is the noise gate a better option to removing the room tone? Thanks. Okay, that's a great question, Hugo. So gating is not removing any noise. In other words, when the gate is open, and I always like to think of it as a window, when the window is open, whomever is talking, singing, narrating, they're singing, narrating, talking, and the noise is all there. So whatever level the noise is at, it's there. When they stop talking, the window closes, now you don't hear talking, and now you don't hear any room tone or noise. That's the only time it's gone, is when the gate closes. So when they're talking, the noise is there. Now, if you were to do a noise print and denoise, that's removing the noise from when they're talking and when they're not talking, okay? So it's by nature a little more aggressive, but by design. So if you've got something that's really noisy, not just room tone noisy, but like right now my gardeners are outside, you know, you wouldn't want to use a noise gate there, because what's going to happen is I'll be talking, you'll hear, and then when I stop talking, you know, you wouldn't want that. So you'd want to denoise something like that. Okay? Cool. All right, let's go over back to here. Wait, we've got a lot of questions today. I love this. Thank you for being so interactive. Oh my gosh, so many on YouTube. Okay, let's come over here. All right, so let's see. Hello. Okay, Plantham, David, Francis. Okay. Okay, Francis. I use Audition for editing, mixing, and mastering classical music. What do you recommend for squishing the huge dynamic range down slightly to something more manageable? Limit, compress, automation. Francis. So if you're talking about again, a finished mixed piece, yes, something like our multiband compressor, which has a tube-modeled brick wall limiter. There's even a really nice classical preset in there. Will allow you to adjust the dynamics in multiple bands and also set that digital ceiling just to punch everything up to make it a little bit louder, a little bit more present. Also just did a stream on this very recently, but you can find this on my Audio 101 on YouTube about using limiting and mastering, okay? That's the key. Now, again, if you just want to, I'm not a fan of compressing classical music. Why? Because classical music, by design, is extremely dynamic. Now, that doesn't mean you don't limit it or hard limit it, because, again, we have a standard here for loudness. You can still limit something and it can still have dynamic range. When you compress, though, classical instrumentation, now you just don't have dynamics anymore. This is what I loathe about modern soundtracks when they record them with jazz bands or orchestras. Everything's in your face, right? It's just the worst. Like new Disney soundtracks, for my ears, my personal opinion, they're impossible to listen to. One, it all sounds like phoned in musicians, which it is. Two, it's so compressed because they're mixing it like it's a rock record that everything's just in your face. And classical and jazz shouldn't be that way. Shouldn't. What does that even mean? I don't know. But music that's written with, articulations and dynamic changes, well, if you respect those, you want to be able to preserve those, okay? That was a really long explanation. So the key is, again, if you just want to make everything louder and tame some peaks, hard limit or digital broadcast limiter with multiband compressor, brick wall limiting built in. Really nice. If you're wanting to tame some individual peaks, yes, you can compress. I would use a very small ratio, though. 2-to-1, 3-to-1 maximum, and don't exceed the threshold by too much. If you just want to control, you might have a violin solo that's really going out there. Okay, fair enough, all right? Okay. Ray Acosta, Normalize makes a more natural adjust than hard limit, right? I use -6 to -3. Do you okay, so again, Ray, I'm not going to get into the whole thing. Normalize and hard limit are completely different things. Hard limit is actually affecting dynamics. Normalize is just looking at the loudest peak, revealing how much headroom you have, and then globally amplifying, or I suppose de-amplifying, everything. But if you're normalizing to -3 to -6, that is good. But as I showed you, and as you can see here, if you've got this one peak, though, that can throw everything off, right? This peak right now, let's scan it. Where is it? It's at -4.5. So that means I've only got, at -3, I've got a decibel and a half if I want to normalize to -3. I'm not going to hear that. None of this audio is going to sound any louder, right, because of this. So I need to fix that ahead of time. All right. So the strategy to go is to make sound as natural as possible. Well, again, that's my opinion, Ray. And that's a great question. I mean, everybody mixes a little bit differently. I'll admit that today, when I'm delivering things, everybody wants it just louder. It's attention grabbing. So yes, I compress and limit way more than I ever did, because that's just stylistically how things are done. But I actually not long ago had to deliver a little indie film classical underscore piece, and I hard limited the master in mastering, but everything was still very dynamic. So the quiet parts were still quiet. The loud parts were loud. And then when the whole orchestra was playing, which was courtesy of Native Instruments, it just sounded great. But I allowed some dynamic. I allowed it to breathe a little. All right? Cool. Okay, let's bounce over quickly to back to Twitter Periscope. All right. Cameron. Any tips for how to structure folders to keep Audition files organized for round-trip workflows? Well, unfortunately, because we don't have bins in Audition yet, it's a real drag. So if it's coming from Premiere, it can be a bit more organized. Unfortunately, at the moment, Cameron, it's one of the top requests, and I would highly recommend going to User Voice. If you can't find the link, hit me up on Twitter, and I'll send it to you. To vote that feature up. We need bins for organization. I'm with you. It's really hard to do it without it. Okay, William, I was trained to use loudness radar and use the compression to essentially mix the levels to desired. William, I mean that's okay. Sure. I mean, no reason you can't do that. Loudness radar is giving you, an average measurement. I think it also shows you peaks. But it's showing you an average over time measurement. And if you're doing sort of broadcast audio or film, yeah, that can be fine. It's not my favorite meter because it's not quite as fast and responsive. Again, there's dozens of third-party, you get ppm meters, however you like to meter and monitor. But yes, that's a legit way to do it. Entirely up to you. Now, that doesn't necessarily help you determining normalization versus compression per se, but as far as doing a final mix, yeah, loudness radar is legit. All right. Yes, and the problem you have with that is that the method is that you don't always get the levels I need to get to minus 13. Exactly, because it's showing you a rolling average. So, the issue, of course, is this is where you would take it into something like amplitude. Now, we have the loudness radar here. But if you're looking at, the statistics of either the final mix or individual clips, there's things that you can do to treat them to just give you additional overall loudness without affecting the dynamic range all that much. Okay? All right. Let's go back over to Facebook here. So many great questions today. Thank you for being so present. All right. Craig Larson, how do you deal with different voice types in recording you're editing? For example, a bass baritone voice being overpowering in a scene with a more tenor voice that is softer. So actually, I just did a stream on this as well. So for that, you can use loudness auto matching to match the apparent loudness, not peak levels, but the actual average loudness of speakers to bring them all to about the same level. You're still going to have potentially a few little jumps here and there, but you can use the Essential Sound Panel in Premiere or Audition auto match to do just that. Excuse me. Now, if you have the dialogue for each speaker contained on a single track, that's where you're going to have to get a little creative with compression, and you can do it. You might just that's a longer answer, but you could theoretically do it with a compressor. It also depends on how much of a variation we're talking. But even still, if you had to use a ratio of 8-to-1, 10-to-1, any ratios above 10-to-1 is considered limiting. You could do it that way. Okay. All right. Hey, Taria. How are you from Finland? Great to see you. All right. Thank you, Chuck. Okay, Steve Miller. Any reason why to send to Audition for simple tasks like this versus using Essential Sound? Yes, Steve. The reason I did it in Audition was to showcase to you amplitude statistics. So if we had amplitude statistics in Premiere, I wouldn't have to do this there. But this is, and you don't have to do that. You could still do it on the Premiere side. The difference is, one, you're getting a much larger waveform display, so you can really see it better. Two, it's easier to destructively repair those changes or non-destructively. And three, you just have more, like I use frequency analysis in real time all the time. For audio, this is where I do my audio work. If it's, just making something a little louder, raise a fader, I'll just stay in Premiere. But something like this, where it's a little more critical, I just want to use these tools. You don't have to. And of course, you can go back without making a change. Entirely up to you. Okay? All right. Mark Yaramio, is there a good source for learning Audition? Yes. My Audio 101 series on YouTube. I'll put it in the chat here. That's not me plugging me. That's just 30 years of inspired knowledge sharing with you. There's 20 episodes, 25 hours. Some of them are chapterized. They all were sourced from live stream, so I apologize. Back in those days, I used to answer questions midstream, so sometimes there's some tangential thought. But it's very thorough, and if you really want to learn, it's a good place to start. And it's all separated by category. Here, I'm putting it in the chat for you now. Jason Levine video is my YouTube channel. And again, the playlist is called Audio 101. Craig Larson, it's a great revelation to find out normalization does not affect dynamics. Limiting does, though. I didn't know that. Yes. Again, the common misconception, right? I hear this a lot. I see it a lot. It's also, again, really common that people apply something like a limiter and then wonder why things are so squeezed, or why low amplitude stuff just got so much louder. Yeah, because you're messing with dynamics, right? And it depends if you're using a hard limiter versus, again, something like just a compressor limiter with a ratio of 10 to 1, 11 to 1, because you have more control. So different reasons for using those in different situations. Okay. All right. Got it. All right. Very cool. So that whole thing about CDs taking away the dynamics that vinyl recordings have is just a myth. Actually, Craig, I mean, it's not, because again, and particularly more so in the late 90s when remastering became good. No, this was the beginning of the loudness wars. Now, 80s CDs, true, you didn't squash dynamic ranges because masters in the 80s were literally transferred from the masters that they used for vinyl. They didn't even typically re-EQ or recompress. You had a little bit more dynamic range. CDs have about 96 decibels. Vinyl has about 80. So it preserved what was there. That's why old CDs are quieter too, right? They're not leveraging all of the bits, all of the amplitude that they could, because they weren't using hard limiting and dynamics processing like they are today. They didn't have it then. But now, dynamics are killed on CD, or in music in general. I mean, no one's buying, well, some are buying CDs, but the way that it's produced now, everything is just hard limited to death, you know. But in fact, though, and I did a stream on this a couple of years ago, and I used to have a blog that talked about it. The thing is, vinyl, even though it has less dynamic range, yes, because of the way you have to master vinyl to be careful about, right, skips and you know, jumps with particularly low frequency, they didn't hard limit things like they do now. So you just generally have more air, more breathing room. That's why bass sounds warmer. Just more dynamic range, and trying to use it all, you know. There's poorly mastered vinyl too, of course, but a really well mastered LP, yeah, it's, you know, if you're into that, it can be pretty shivers down your spine kind of a thing, you know. All right, sweet. Okay, and let's see any more here on YouTube. Okay, Daniel Chaplin, can you show the workflow from Premiere to Audition and back one more time? Certainly, Daniel. Okay, so again, if we're just talking about an individual clip that you're working on, like this one here, okay, I can right-click or control-click and choose to edit the clip in Audition. If I wanted to work on all the audio, incidentally, I could go up to the Edit menu, Edit in Audition, Sequence, and that will send everything over there. And again, you'll have some options for handles. When you do the edit in Audition, it brings you over here. Now you can process this in any way that you want. So as I showed you before, let's just, for the sake of doing this, let's just squeeze that peak down with my little snap right there. Okay, even more so. All right, like that. Now let's go ahead and normalize this. So here, first I'll play it for you. Here's what it is. So in the case of this file, what I really want. Quiet. Let's go ahead and normalize it to -3. Okay. Boom, big amplitude. File, save. And now when we click back to Premiere, if you just look at the waveform there, now you can see redone. And if I were to play this back in Premiere now. So in the case of this file, what I really wanted to showcase was that normalization. Okay. Fixed. So that is the workflow there. Okay. David Lewis, I broadcast live, so I'm not in a multi-track situation. When I open my mic over a quiet part of music, you can hear room tone. Can I add a physical noise gate in the chain before my mic preamp? Certainly, absolutely, yeah. A lot of streamers do that. I don't do that because my streaming system's right here, and I don't care. I mean, it's, you know, little room tone noise. Eventually, if I move this away and I have a separate controller, or I do like a little Mac Mini or something. This is an old laptop, so it's burning. You can hear that fan going. I'm also simulcasting. So, but yeah, you can absolutely. In fact, the Behringer Composer is a really popular one. Of course, DBX 166 and all those, really common, super common to do that. So yeah, I would recommend doing that. by all means. Often, sometimes the mic preamps will have a built-in compressor limiter gate, something like that too. There's many of those, but yeah. In fact, I have a Focusrite one that has that. What's it called? The track. Can't read it from here. It's the Focusrite track something or other, and it's a mic preamp. Is it a tube-based one? I think it's tube-based, and it has a nice gate circuitry built in as well. Okay. All right. What is the difference in Audition from amplitude statistics and diagnostics? So amplitude statistics is just giving you data, information on the file. The diagnostics panel is where you can repair audio based on clicks or digital clipping. This is also where you can, in an automated way, delete silence in between spoken passages and also mark audio. So it can automatically create regions and mark audio, not quite as accurately as I would have liked and not with as many bells and whistles as it used to have. But that's the difference. So the diagnostics panel is for largely for repairing clicks and digital clipping or digital overmodulation. All right. Okay, last one here. How to put dialogue effect for film. Ins works from India. I don't know what you mean by a dialogue effect. If you're just talking about adding compression, that's kind of what the theme of this was. You can check it out. Go back to the beginning or just look at Audio 101, Episode 8. All right. How do you raise the pitch of a voice, Brian Taylor? Well, a number of ways you can do it. Easiest way is under time and pitch. You can go into something like pitch shifter or pitch bender or stretch and pitch. All of these will work. If you go into stretch and pitch, this is kind of the easiest way to do it. You can pitch shift without affecting duration. So let's say you want to raise it. Let's raise it by a couple of semitones here. And now when I play this back.
Showcase was that normalization isn't always your friend.
Okay, versus the original.
Showcase was that normalization.
You get the idea. Okay. You can also independently adjust duration without affecting pitch using stretch and pitch. So lots of different ways to do that. Okay. All right. And it looks like that's all we've got for today. Fantastic. Any more over here? All right. Karen Chandra Bose, thank you so much. Oh, you're very welcome. Hard limited to death. Good t-shirt idea. Absolutely. Right? You know? All right, my friends. Well, that is all the time we have. Thank you for being so interactive and so many great questions. I will be back on stream tomorrow, either on the Premiere Pro or After Effects Facebook pages, cherry picking some fun features to showcase to you. And then on Wednesday, I've already decided, Wednesday on the Premiere Pro Facebook page, as well as on Twitter, Periscope, and YouTube, I'll do a complete overhaul on how to use a compressor limiter and really talk about setting compression for voice. All right, so if you want to learn about that, you want to see it in real time, you want to bring your questions, be sure to tune in on Wednesday. Until then, have a great rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world, and we'll see you again next time. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.